I remember the exact moment my world began to unravel. It was not with a fight, nor with a tear, but with a kiss that was not meant to happen. His lips were not my husband's, yet my body responded like it had been starving for that touch my entire life. My back pressed against the cold wall of his apartment, his hands gripping my waist with a hunger that mirrored mine. The taste of red wine lingered between us, the flicker of dim light casting shadows that made me forget everything I once promised. That one night, that single act of surrender, it shattered the life I had spent years building. Before I go any further, I want to pause for just a moment to thank you, my incredible audience. To all my loyal subscribers, I cannot thank you enough for riding with me through every story we tell here. And to all my new and returning viewers who have not subscribed yet, I truly cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support is the fuel and energy that keeps this channel alive. Do not forget to drop your thoughts in the comments section as well, because your voices are what keep these stories meaningful. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Sarah, a 32-year-old woman living in the suburbs of Texas. On paper, my life looked perfect. I had been married to Mark for 8 years. He was the kind of man most women prayed for: loyal, dependable, steady. He worked long hours at his construction company, came home tired but always managed to kiss my forehead before bed. We had a little house with white shutters, a backyard with a swing, and Sunday dinners at my mother's. If you looked at us from the outside, you would have thought I was living the American dream. But behind that picture-perfect image, something in me was restless. My marriage had grown predictable. Mark loved me faithfully, but his affection had become routine. I craved fire, passion, the kind of intimacy that left my heart racing. Instead, I felt like I was suffocating in routine kisses, scheduled intimacy, and conversations about bills. I began to wonder if this was what the rest of my life was going to look like. That was when I met Daniel. Daniel was a colleague from my workplace. Tall, confident, with dark hair and eyes that held secrets. He had an energy about him that drew people in, a sharp wit, a charming smile, the kind of man who knew exactly what to say and when to say it. At first, it was harmless. Friendly conversations by the coffee machine, inside jokes about office chaos, glances that lingered a little too long. But then, those glances turned into lunches, lunches turned into late-night texts, and those texts, well, they became the sparks that lit the fire. I still remember the first time Daniel brushed his hand against mine. It was accidental, maybe, but the way my body reacted was undeniable. A jolt, like electricity surging through me, reminding me of a desire I thought had died long ago. From that moment, it was as if something inside me had been awakened. I told myself it was innocent. I told myself I was just enjoying harmless attention. After all, I was married. I wore Mark's ring every day. That ring was supposed to mean loyalty, love, faithfulness. But soon, the ring felt heavy on my finger, like a chain reminding me of everything I was about to betray. The night it finally happened, I had no excuse. Mark had been out of town for a work retreat, and Daniel invited me to his apartment for a drink. I knew I should have said no. I knew that walking through his door would change everything. But temptation is cruel. It whispers to you in the quiet, makes wrong feel right, and convinces you that you deserve more. We sat on his couch, sipping wine, talking about life, about love, about the things that made us feel alive. His knee brushed against mine, and I did not move away. His hand lingered on my thigh, and I let it stay. Then he leaned in, and I let him. Our kiss was desperate, filled with hunger, with longing, with everything I had been craving. By the time I realized how far we had gone, it was too late. My clothes lay scattered on his floor, my wedding vows drowned under the weight of lust. For that one night, I let myself feel alive. But when the morning sun crept through his blinds, reality hit me with crushing force. I had betrayed my husband. I had betrayed myself. And worst of all, I had destroyed the life we built, all for one night of lust. That night became the turning point of my story. I wish I could tell you it ended there, that it was just a mistake and nothing more. But when you taste forbidden fruit, you realize how intoxicating it is. And I was not ready to let go. When I drove home from Daniel's apartment that morning, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. My lips still tasted like his kiss, my skin still carried his touch, but my soul felt like it had been ripped apart. I remember staring down at my wedding ring, twisting it nervously around my finger, wondering if Mark would see the guilt written across my face. I rehearsed lies in my head before I even parked the car. That was how quickly deceit became a part of me. When I walked into our house, the air smelled of him, of Mark. His jacket was still hanging by the door, his coffee mug from the morning before still on the counter. Our home looked the same, but it no longer felt like mine. I set down my purse and leaned against the wall, my chest heavy with shame. I told myself it was just one night, just one mistake. If I buried it deep enough, maybe it would disappear. But guilt is a living thing. It grows, it whispers, it gnaws at your insides. That night when Mark called me from his hotel, his voice was warm and steady. He asked me about my day, laughed about something one of his coworkers had done, and ended the call with "I love you, Sarah." My throat tightened so hard that I could barely respond. I whispered, "I love you too," but inside, the words felt like poison. The days that followed were a blur of normal routines that no longer felt normal. Cooking dinner, folding laundry, watching TV with Mark, all of it was coated with an invisible layer of deceit. Every time he touched me, I stiffened. Every time he looked at me with love, I wondered if he could see the truth hiding in my eyes. And yet, even in my guilt, I found myself thinking of Daniel. His kiss, his touch, the way he made me feel alive in ways Mark had not in years. I hated myself for it, but desire has a way of pulling you deeper even when you know you are drowning. One afternoon at work, Daniel caught me alone in the copy room. His hand brushed mine, and that familiar spark ignited. I should have pulled away, but instead, I leaned into it. His lips found mine in a quick, reckless kiss. I remember whispering, "We cannot do this," even as my body betrayed me by wanting more. Daniel smirked and said nothing, but his eyes told me everything. He knew I was his now, caught in a web of passion and guilt. At home, the distance between Mark and me grew wider. He noticed it, of course. He asked me if something was wrong, if I was stressed, if I was tired. I nodded, smiled, lied. I told him it was nothing. And he believed me, because he trusted me. That trust, it cut me deeper than any accusation ever could. There were nights when Mark would reach for me in bed, his hands gentle, his heart present, but my mind was elsewhere. I would close my eyes and imagine Daniel instead. I despised myself for it, but I let it happen. I let my husband make love to me while I fantasized about another man. That betrayal was not just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, complete. The more I tried to suppress it, the more reckless I became. Daniel and I started stealing hours together. Lunches that stretched too long, work meetings that never happened, excuses that I fed to Mark without blinking. Each lie slid easier than the one before it, until lying felt natural. But guilt never stayed quiet. It showed up in the way I avoided Mark's eyes when he asked about my day. It lived in the way I snapped at him over small things, trying to deflect my own shame. It thrived in the nights when I could not sleep, staring at the ceiling while Mark breathed peacefully beside me, unaware that his wife was crumbling. One evening, we were at dinner with friends, and someone made a joke about cheating. The table laughed, but Mark shook his head seriously and said, "That is one thing Sarah would never do. I trust her with everything in me." Everyone nodded, and the conversation moved on, but I sat there frozen. His words pierced me like a knife. Later that night, while Mark slept, I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked the same. Blonde hair falling over my shoulders, blue eyes that once carried innocence. But now, when I looked at myself, all I saw was a liar. I whispered to my own reflection, "What have you done?" But still, I did not stop. Daniel had become my addiction, my escape. I told myself that Mark would never know, that I could have both, the safety of my marriage and the fire of Daniel. But deep down, I knew the truth. Secrets like mine do not stay hidden forever. They rot everything they touch. And soon, the cracks would begin to show. The night everything fell apart started off so ordinary that I did not see it coming. Mark had come home from a week-long business trip. He walked in with his suitcase in one hand and flowers in the other, smiling as if I were still the woman he had vowed his life to. I hugged him, but my embrace was stiff, rehearsed. Inside, my heart was racing for reasons I could not yet name. He placed the flowers on the counter, kissed my forehead, and looked me in the eye. His gaze was different, searching, heavy, almost sharp. "Sarah," he said softly, "we need to talk." My stomach dropped. My mind went blank, scrambling for excuses I had not prepared. I forced a nervous laugh, asking, "About what?" But deep inside, I already knew. Mark's hand reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a phone, not his, not mine. Daniel's phone. The blood drained from my face. "I found this in your car," Mark said, his voice low but steady. "Do you want to explain why your coworker's phone was in the passenger seat of my wife's vehicle?" The silence was suffocating. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Lies that usually flowed so easily refused to form. Mark stared at me, his eyes burning with a mixture of anger and devastation. That was the moment I realized the truth had been waiting to explode, and I had nowhere left to hide. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were not the kind that asked for forgiveness. They were the kind that confirmed guilt. Mark stepped back as if my very presence sickened him. "How long, Sarah?" His voice cracked on my name. "How long have you been lying to me?" My lips trembled. I whispered, "It was just one night." Mark's laugh was hollow, bitter. "Do not insult me. I am not a fool. One night does not make a man's phone appear in your car." "How long?" The weight of my silence answered for me. His jaw clenched. He turned away, pressing his fists against the counter as if he needed to hold himself together. That night was chaos. I confessed more than I intended, more than I thought I could. I told him about Daniel, about the afternoon stolen, about the lies woven into our marriage like poison threads. Each word seemed to carve deeper into Mark's heart. I saw him break in real time, his face shifting between disbelief, rage, and unbearable grief. "You wore my ring," he said, his voice trembling with a pain I will never forget. "You promised me forever, and you gave yourself to another man. Do you have any idea what you have done to me?" The worst part was, I did. We argued until our voices were raw. At one point, he shouted so loudly that I thought the neighbors would hear. At another, he fell silent, staring at me as though I were a stranger sitting in his wife's skin. By the end of the night, Mark packed a bag. He stood by the doorway with tears in his eyes. "I do not even know who you are anymore, Sarah," he whispered. "But I cannot look at you without seeing him." And then he left. The days that followed were like living inside a nightmare I could not wake from. I called his phone, but he ignored me. I showed up at his brother's house, where I knew he was staying, but he would not come to the door. The silence from him was louder than any words he could have spoken. At work, Daniel avoided me. Whatever thrill had existed between us vanished the moment consequences entered the picture. I was nothing more than a regret to him now. When our eyes met across the office, he turned away, leaving me alone with the ruins of my choices. I had destroyed two men's lives with one reckless hunger. Weeks passed, and papers came. Divorce papers. Seeing my name beside his on those documents made my chest tighten so hard I could not breathe. It was not just the end of a marriage, it was the end of everything we had built. The home, the trust, the years of laughter and love. All of it reduced to ashes because of one night that spiraled into betrayal after betrayal. I moved into a small apartment across town. The silence there was different from the silence at home. At least in our house, silence was filled with Mark's presence, his scent, his energy. In this new place, silence was just emptiness. Sometimes I still drive past our old home. I imagine Mark inside, maybe packing the last of my things, maybe sitting in the living room we once shared, but always without me. The pain is unbearable because I know I caused it. People often say time heals everything, but some wounds do not heal, they scar, they haunt. One night of lust cost me the life I once thought was unshakable. I traded forever for a fleeting fire that burned out as quickly as it began. And in the end, there was no forgiveness, no reconciliation, no second chance. There was only loss. Because betrayal does not just break trust. It destroys lives. And mine will never be the same.